This is TV 10 and 55 Focus, a program dealing with issues affecting everyone on Long Island and the tri-state area. Now your host, Richard Rose.
Hi, I'm Richard Rose and welcome to Focus. It's our pleasure today to have James Carver. He's the president of the Nassau Police Benevolent Association, commonly known as the Nassau PBA. And welcome to the show, Mr. Carver.
Thank you very much, Rich. Good to be here.
These are interesting times, are they not?
Absolutely. Every year it keeps on getting more and more interesting, it seems.
Yeah, you represent the police union in Nassau County, which is besieged with financial problems. Now, we should point out we're taping this show on Thursday afternoon, and you're right in the middle of negotiations. This is going to air on Sunday in the afternoon. You're right in the middle of negotiations to try and avoid a police precinct closing plan that the police officers are none too happy about. Where does that stand right now, the state of negotiations?
Well, we've been dealing with the police department, Deputy Commissioner Crumpler for the most part on this because he knows policing more than a county executive does and more than the legislature, such as Peter Schmidt. So we've been sitting down on a daily basis discussing the issues that we have and concerns that we have with the closures of the precincts and how that may affect public safety and our response time, along with the service that we provide the public when they come into a station house.
Now, you referred to Peter Schmidt. He was on the show last week, and he's the presiding officer in the
Yes.
majority with the Republicans. They were supposed to vote on this past Monday, but it got put off because one of the Republican legislators in the majority, Joseph Belisi, was hospitalized, but also was portrayed that it was because of negotiations. Was it put off because Joseph Belisi wasn't there, or because you guys were in negotiation?
Well, I had met with the county executive and his staff probably the Thursday before the vote, and he had called up, wanted to sit there and discuss these issues. And we started to talk about it, and we all agreed that Monday was too quick to have the vote, and let's let it, a week later. So it was interesting when I went there that Monday that Peter Schmidt said it was because Joe Belisi was hospitalized, but this deal was done to delay it before Joe even went to the hospital.
So there wasn't a case where they didn't think they had the votes and then they say buy themselves some time or anything like that, which some people have suggested. It was an honest to goodness situation where you guys were talking.
Absolutely. And that's one of the good things is that, for the first couple of weeks, both sides were out there giving their side to the public. We both listened to the public. And, Mr. Mangano, I'm sure he heard what the public had to say. We have too. And like I said, the concerns about this, we wanted to straighten out.
Well, so that everybody knows, the proposal is to cut in half the 8 precincts that are in Nassau County and have 4 policing centers where there'd just be a couple of officers on duty and then consolidate the rest of the operations into the other 4 precincts, and the idea to put 48 more officers out there and to keep up the 177 patrols and save the county $20 million. And I would, it's been a rancorous debate, no question about that. It's even gotten personal, hasn't it?
You try not to get personal, but I think when both sides are that passionate about something, I think it could be taken that it's personal, and it's not. This is truly all about public safety. And one of the things you just mentioned was the 48 extra police officers on the street.
Because you disagree with virtually all of the proposals, all the claims that are made about savings and how it'll all work out. Why don't you go through that point by point?
Well, one of the things I've talked to the commissioner about, and also the Mangano, I think if they would have came out to the public and told them first off, you're still going to have your 177 sectors out there, but we're not putting one extra police officer on the street. That would have been the truth. But what they're trying to portray is there's going to be actually more police on the street. What this plan does is eliminate 100 budgeted positions in the police department. And those are the administrators that they're talking about that work in those 4 precincts they want to close down.
Yeah, you had Peter Schmidt here last week, the presiding officer, basically saying that they don't do anything in the precinct house. I asked him, what do they do? And he said, I don't know, they just sit there. Time for them to get to work. It was pretty strong words, part of the reason why you're here to respond. Right. But what do you, when you hear that, the perception out there is that we have highly paid police officers, some people think overpaid, and that they're doing nothing.
Well, it's simply not true. I take offense to what Peter Schmidt said. I've worked both in the street and in the station house for my 25 years before I came on to the executive board of the PBA. And our guys work hard. There are times where there's lulls, where there's nothing going on. But for the most part, those guys are backing up the guys on the street. They're answering the phone call from the citizens that don't want to call 911 because they don't feel it's an emergency, but they need to get the information, and it's police information. So you have somebody that's answering the phone there. You also have people, a police officer that's putting out sensitive teletype information and helping in the process of arrests of prisoners when they come in the station house. And then there's also people come into the station house because they don't want to have a police car in front of their house oftentimes. So they're able to come into the station house, sit down and talk to a police officer who understands what the law is, and go through what their issue is, whether it be a domestic problem that they're having, a neighborhood problem, or whatever type of problem that they're having, and then they're able to talk to that police officer, make a case report, and then be able to go upstairs and talk to the detective that's going to catch his case and sit there and speak with him immediately. And that's what the station house is all about. It's for the public to come there and get all the services that they need.
You know, and the case has been made on your part and some of the police officers that right now we're seeing a spike in crime and burglaries, and that this will somehow make Nassau a less safe place. Do you stand by that? Because, again, last week Peter Schmidt saying, you know, that was a couple of months that you took a survey for, and then Newsday did an article showing that in past years these numbers really weren't all that different than some past years. Is that a manipulation of the numbers to try to create fear out there and get people to think that there's going to be a rise in crime? Do you think this will lead to an increase in crime?
Well, I think it will eventually. And I think if you ask the public out there if they feel safe in their homes right now, after reading Newsday and other periodicals where they talk about the home invasions that are happening, the burglaries that happen, that's probably the most personal thing that you can have is someone entering your home, whether you're there or whether you're not there. So we have to take that, and the police department does take all those crimes serious. Now, you talk about numbers. They say last January and February there was a lot of snow on the ground, so burglaries were down. That's why this same time period, it seems like there's a larger than average spike in those crimes. However, for the whole year, there was a 5% increase in burglaries. Think about that. If they're saying the first 2 months, burglary crime was down so much that that's the reason why it spiked this year, and it was up 5% the whole year, it goes to show you that burglaries were up. With 2 months not even being counted in, burglaries were up. So that's a crime that we take very, very seriously.
So if we grant that, how does this precinct plan in any way impact that? What difference does it make?
Well, I believe, you know, obviously this has been a big public debate. Criminals read the paper too. They know what's going on out there. And when you're talking about closing down station houses, in my opinion, what you're telling the bad guys out there is that we've given up on policing. You know, a station house is a symbol of law and order, and it's the first thing, like the 5th Precinct. It's the first big building you see when you come in from New York City. There's a huge sign in front of the 5th Precinct that's almost on Dutch Broadway. It talks about, you know, Nassau County Police, 5th Precinct, Ed Mangano, County Executive. You can't get that much more of a symbol to warn anybody that's coming into this county. The police are here.
Well, now we're scheduled again. We're taping this on Thursday. It airs on Sunday, and the very next day, tomorrow, it was supposed to be voted on, was put off for a week, so these negotiations could pick up and proceed. Now, both of the parties are going to be out of town for the next few days for scheduled trips that you and Mr. Mangano had months ago. How are these negotiations going to proceed, and have you made any progress? Is there anything you can tell us about at this point? Any likely breakthrough before the Monday vote?
I don't know if there's going to be a likely breakthrough on this thing. We represent the police officers. There's 3 different unions you have here with 3 different concerns, okay? What I represent is the frontline police officers. We are talking about what affects us and our ability to help the public when they come into these station houses. So we're addressing those issues. The detectives are also addressing the issues that you're going to move detectives from one precinct and put them all in another precinct. There's not enough room to house them there. There's just not enough room. There's also not enough room to process doubling the amount of arrests that by cutting it from 8 to 4. So there is not enough room in the station house right now to be able to conduct business the way they want to conduct.
There's talk that maybe putting a few more detectives there, that the detectives union has asked for that they would like at least a few more detectives put at these policing centers. Any likelihood of that, as Mr. Mangano indicated that he would go along with that?
When we sat down with Mangano over the weekend, one of the things he said to us is, as long as it saves the same amount of money, you know,
well, how would that save them the same amount of money, though, if you add people back in?
Well, there's no detectives that are going to be eliminated from the precincts, according to Mr. Mangano, under this plan. So if there's 15 in one and 15 in another, and you're shifting them over and making a squad of 30, there's no reason why you can't just leave the 15 where they are. It's the supervision that becomes a problem, and you know, any supervisor will tell you about the span of control that, you know, all the subordinates need to be supervised, and they just can't be left there, you know, to do their own thing.
All right, so the bigger issue that you're really stuck with here is, because I've been around here long enough to know that 10 years ago everybody loved their police officers and were glad to pay them more than elsewhere, and now the whole talk is that police officers, they make too much and we can't afford you. Is that the case? We'll talk with James Carver, the head of the PBA in Nassau County, when we return right here on Focus.
TV 10 and 55 Focus now continues.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Richard Rose. We're here with James Carver. He is the PBA president in Nassau County. Thank you for coming on the show. A lot going on. Obviously, Nassau County broke. They've got to find a way to save hundreds of millions of dollars. Suffolk County about to be in this situation, and everything's being reevaluated. I've been in this job 15 years. I remember doing shows where we talked about how Long Island was glad to have a lot of police officers. They wanted to have them overstaffed. They didn't mind if they were paid well. They wanted the best officers because they wanted to make sure the crime was low and that they were safe in their communities. But that was when the counties could afford it. Now they can't afford it, and the headlines are about police officers making well over $100,000 on average. Some of them getting $200,000, $300,000 in lump sum payments when they retire because they work the overtime system at the end and all the things that were granted to them by contracts to get those kinds of payouts.
Right.
And even now, the plan to let them go could net somebody $320,000 if they've been there, I guess, 20 years. Is that correct?
Over 20 years.
Over
That's
20
probably
years.
close to 30 years.
And then they still get their state pension. There are people out there who don't have pension plans. They
Right.
can't barely afford to pay for their houses. Some of them are in threat of foreclosure. They've lost their jobs. What about the case that now the county simply can't afford police officers at this level of pay anymore?
Well, you talk about 10 years ago, right after 9/11, we talked about this internally a lot at different meetings. 10 years ago, there was an elected official in the world that wouldn't sit there and jump in to get into a picture with a police officer and talk about how they're for public safety and that their opponents were not, that they were the true law and order candidate. Now you're talking about 10, 12 years later. Now it's completely the opposite. What they've done to the police officers out there is they blamed us for all the problems over the past 10 years.
How do the officers feel about this, what's been happening?
I think they feel betrayed to a certain level. I know that the elected officials still respect us, but we're used as a pawn during this time, in my opinion, that we're all that's wrong with what's going on in Nassau County, instead of looking at maybe things that they might have done differently. We sat down and we fairly negotiated every single contract that we've had.
With some of the same people who want the concessions now.
Absolutely. You talked before, in 2008, after I became the president, we negotiated a 3-year contract extension that covered the years 13, 14, and 15. That contract was unanimously approved by both sides, Democrats and Republicans, of which Ed Mangano was a county legislator at the time. Now he's a county executive, and Peter Schmidt was the minority leader. But now there's fault with us for having these contracts passed.
Because it runs till 2015. I think you had
Correct.
your wages frozen by NIFA, right?
Correct. Last April 1st, actually March 24th of last year, NIFA came down and they, after they took over as a control period, they froze all public employee wages here in Nassau
And
County.
haven't we had some voluntary retirements already? Isn't the force lower than it used to be?
Absolutely.
At this point? What are the numbers?
We're at 2,380 right now, and in the beginning of 2009, we're at 2,720. So we've had a significant drop in headcount, which accounts for a lot of money savings off of payroll during that period of time.
So you feel
also.
like you've done your part?
Well, we've done our part too, and also in 2009, if you remember, when after the stock market was really starting to get a little shaky there, and sales tax in Nassau County decreased dramatically. Swazi, county executive at the time, he proposed laying off 250 police officers. And all the unions got together and we did a concession plan, a 3-year concession plan that helped the county out during that period of time.
So why not a concession now? Why not a further concession? The county's broke.
We continue to have talks. You need 3 sides to get a deal done right now. You need the unions to agree, you need the county executive to agree, and then you need NIFA to say that what you guys agreed to is okay.
Yeah,
so it's a little bit more complicated than it was in years past. And I don't know if there was a willingness, to be honest with you, of everybody to see the police officers or any public employee negotiate something that reinstates wages
Well, I had a
and,
police
and
officer-
gives concessions at the same time.
Well, I had a police officer stop me in the street, and he said, you guys in the media, you make us the bad guys. We've made concessions, and we're out there working hard every day. We negotiated all these contracts. The taxpayers were willing to give that to us. I guess what's changed, though, is that they just don't have the money right now. And the perception out there, just being fair, I'm telling you what I hear, is that police officers are overpaid and that they've been maybe spoiled in comparison to what the rest of the population is going through. Do you understand the feeling that a lot of people have that way?
Listen, I come from a very large family. You know, I know that that's the perception out there. The reality is out there is that we put a gun on the side of a, on a belt every single day, and we put a bulletproof vest on. We're going into situations that 99% of the people would be running away from. We're there protecting the public each and every day. And I got to tell you, we lost 2 police officers last year in the line of duty. You cannot put a price on that as far as I'm concerned. And that has shown with contract negotiations that everything's been fairly done. So again, police officers feel that, and all public employees, no matter how much they're making, even if they're CSEA, feel that we are being victimized for all the problems that's happened here. That is not the case. We're all willing to do our share to help, but it's got to be shared. And that's something that they keep on talking about, is that shared sacrifice. Well, if you look at the budget, 2012 budget, shared sacrifice is all the pain has to be shared on labor. There's no other pain that's being distributed.
Give me an example. You don't feel it's being spread around fairly, is what you're saying. Do you see waste elsewhere that you think should have been intact instead?
I think during this time, the reassessment, the tax search is killing
all the money
this county.
that goes to property tax appeals.
Absolutely. The county does the assessment. It's a $100 million a year problem. They only collect $20 million of that money, but yet they're paying back $100 million. That needs to be fixed. That's $80 million more in the budget that could help county residents out. And you know what, the county tax is only about 17% of your overall tax bill. And I'm not advocating, I'll never advocate for a tax increase. I'm a resident of Nassau County also.
But would you pay more in taxes to keep the police at this level?
I'll tell you what they should do is like they did with the Coliseum back in last August. Give the people the vote on what they want. If they want their police precincts—
a referendum.
Absolutely. Let them decide if a tax increase is what they want to keep their police precincts open. We're willing to sit there and say, let the public decide on this. We're having people that aren't police experts deciding what we're doing here just to save $1, and you shouldn't do that. Getting back to what they talked about before, 48 more police officers on the street, that's not happening. There's not going to be one extra police officer on the street. We've actually lost plainclothes patrols in 5 of the 8 precincts. We've lost DWI patrols in each of the 8 precincts. We've lost a significant amount of supplemental patrols out there that were backing up the backbone of the department, which is the patrol car. We have lost that over the last couple of years, and we are experiencing further cuts. And we're willing to sit down with the county and discuss concessions.
All right, we have to take a break here, but when we come back, we'll ask James Carver, the president for the Nassau PBA, what he thinks about some of the plans out there for pension reform, because the feeling the county can't afford what's currently in place, when we return right here on Focus.
TV 10 and 55 Focus continues.
And we're back with James Carver. He's the Nassau PBA president. A lot of talk about how to get the costs under control because, I'm sure you're concerned about it too as a taxpayer living in Nassau County, that, the pension costs to local government are just spiraling because the returns from Wall Street, which maybe shouldn't have been relied upon, weren't as great in the last few years, and didn't mask the fact that ultimately the counties and the local governments have to pay these pension costs that were negotiated, that were granted to the unions, and were approved by all the elected officials who are talking about changing it now. So first of all, when you hear the talk about pension reform, and it comes from Governor Cuomo on down, how does that strike you just to even bring that topic up?
Well, we witnessed pension reform just back in 2009 when when the Governor Patterson at the time, vetoed Tier 2. So they wound up coming up with the Tier 5, which at the time I think was supposed to save $25 to $30 billion over the next 30 years.
Which apparently it did not.
Well, it's only been 3 years since then.
But
it's only been enacted for 2 years.
Projected savings from that.
Right. It's only been 2 years. But now Cuomo is coming out with his plan at Tier 6 just 2 years later, talk about how that's going to save $30 billion over the next 30 years. So I don't think that's on top of the $30 billion that was already projected over the other ones. So listen, we're living in different times right now, and we all understand that. Back in 2009 when they vetoed the Tier 2, and they went to Tier 5. The union sat down with the Governor Patterson's staff, again, with our concerns, about police officers. We do think that we're special and we deserve something a little bit different than the average public employee. The same thing with firefighters. We put on our lives on the line every day, no matter where you work, whether you're working in Suffolk County, Nassau County, or all the way up to Buffalo, New York. We're all putting our lives on the line every day. So we sat down there and, expressed our concerns, and they came out with a Tier 5 that was substantially different than Tier 2. Now we're sitting here 2 years later having this discussion all over again about substantially changing tier 5 into a tier 6.
And the governor even indicating that he's flexible now, so people are a little bit confused about, well what is the plan then? But they have to talk about this in order to have something approved for this year's budget. And this one would be the first proposal, since he showed flexibility or talked about flexibility, would have had a defined contribution 401k plan, similar to what a lot of workers in the private sector have. And I don't know exactly what the reaction to it is. I see a lot of newspaper stories saying that the unions struck back hard against that with the governor, saying it wasn't a fair plan and that they wouldn't embrace it. How does it strike you, the thought of a 401k style plan? Well, for future retirees? Well,
under his plan, you would have the option to go into a 401k. Police officers stay on the job 20, 30 years. So with that, I think the reason why he wanted to have a 401k, the reasoning is that you have people that maybe only stay in government work for maybe 2 or 3 years, and they would be able to carry that over. So I think that's the intention of why he did that. 401k for us, obviously, we're against that. The system that we have right now, we feel works, and obviously he's going to change that. We just want an opportunity to be able to sit down with him, discuss our concerns, and go from there.
What happens if the system gets bankrupted, though, and they can't pay the pensioners what they're supposed to pay them?
Well, New York State happens to have probably the best funded pension system.
The controller says that.
Correct. It's probably about 98%, 99%.
But he still says that contributions are not being made at 100% level and that they're in jeopardy of not being follow through in the future if the counties don't come up with these payments.
Okay, I thought they raised the rate for a few years, and then it comes back down again.
That's true.
But what happened in the 90s, if you remember, is that there was almost like a zero contribution rate during the 90s.
It's true.
And there probably should have been maybe a minimum of a 3 or 4 or 5% contribution rate.
So it's kind of a catch-up situation.
That's what we're doing right now, is we're playing catch-up. So I believe the controllers looked into this, and he is trying to fix it so you don't run into this problem in the future if we do have another recession.
Yeah, because what he's concerned about is that, and it was something even floated by the governor, that maybe give the counties and the local governments a bit of a break on what he suggested for the next few years, and not have to pay all that at once. And that's what he's concerned about, would jeopardize the system if we do that. So they're at odds on whether or not to give the local governments a break, but without them getting that break, they're coming after the employees and the unions and saying, we got to get the savings somewhere because we can't afford to put these many tens of millions of dollars into the pension system. So I mean, one indirectly leads to another. And that's why in a lot of ways you're getting the kind of pressure you're getting even just about your yearly benefits that you're receiving now.
Absolutely, it's...
So pension reform a necessity? Are you willing to embrace some sort of compromise there?
Absolutely. We did that back in 2009 with Governor Patterson, and we'll do it again with Cuomo. We just want an opportunity to be able to sit in the room and discuss the issues at hand.
How about some who've called for changing the state arbitration system, whereby, if one county gets something, then usually the arbitrator says, well, Suffolk got it, now Nassau's got to get it, Westchester got it, Rockland got it. And then they sort of leapfrog the amount of payments that they get. And the elected officials saying this sort of locks us into these exorbitant increases all the time.
Well, Nassau and Suffolk, they're the comparables. In every arbitration, they compare with each other. They don't go up to Rockland, they don't go to Westchester.
But I mean, in these other places, that happens as well.
With their neighboring police departments up there. Nassau and Suffolk, it cuts both ways. We've had arbitration awards where we've been ordered to work more days without extra compensation. We've been ordered to work overtime at straight time rates. So there's always been some, it cuts both ways. The unions don't get all what they want, and the county doesn't get everything that they want either. So it's fair. Don't forget, we cannot strike, and we have nothing else. If you didn't have binding arbitration, you would basically have this collective begging, and that's not good for anyone.
We have just under a minute. If you don't come to some agreement, are you afraid that there's layoffs? Is that a motivating factor to avoid potential layoffs that are out there in Nassau County?
Well, right now there's a separation incentive that we signed off 2 weeks ago that's going for a vote on Monday that would incentivize people to leave right now that might want to retire within the next couple of years. It's $1,000 per each year, and I think we have probably right now about 80 to 100 officers of all ranks that are opted into that after the CSEA was offered the same program in December of last year.
Well, we are out of time, but you've answered all the questions I had anyway, and we'll find out what happens tomorrow when the Nassau legislature takes up all of these contentious issues. We want to thank you for joining us. James Carver, he is the PBA president in Nassau County. And thank you for being there. I'm Richard Rose. Be sure to join us next week for yet another edition of Focus.